Hi everyone, it's Roger here from What's On at Disney Plus, and in this episode we're going to be doing something a little bit different because I'm going to be bringing in Josh, who we've got a special guest today to talk about Bluey. So I'm going to pass this one over to Josh. So here we go.
Thanks, Roger. Hey, this is Josh. Thrilled to be with you guys. And we're going to be talking today about Bluey, the huge international hit show out of Australia. And so to kind of have a great discussion about it, to have sort of go beyond the surface about it, we've actually brought in the co-host of Gotta Be Done, which is the original Bluey podcast. Mary, thrilled to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Josh. Lovely to be here. G'day, Roger. And yeah, always happy to talk about Bluey.
What's fun about Bluey is now that we've all seen a little bit of it, Mary and I, with our kids, have seen quite a lot of it. I know Roger has recently engaged with it. This is something for everyone in a sense. The comedy of it, I think it was recently put on the top 100 sitcoms list from Rolling Stone. That this is something that everyone relates to and really enjoys. And it's a very, even though it's these little 8-minute episodes, very different. And there's a lot going on underneath the surface of this show. And so I don't know, Mary, as an intro, most people might expect this to be just like a Disney Junior show. How would you might say this is unique, from other kids' shows?
Wow, where to start? Look, Josh, I used to say it was different because parents could actually sit down and watch it and not just want to die. But now I think actually it's more than that. Bluey will change your life. And that is just because this tiny little show about a family of dogs just packs in so much heart and just really honest storytelling about what family life is like. It's not those classic stories of, someone's forgotten your birthday and just stress about it all day. It's not those, anyone who's watched kids TV could probably rattle off 100 of them, but Bluey is so original. And yeah, as you said, I'm talking to you from Australia today. It is also so Australian, which we love here, but I think that's actually become something the world really loves about it too.
It's really true. And I know you've gotten to speak to a number of the people involved in the show, Joe Brum a couple of times, the show creator. And I see that you've got the show protagonists there, right there with you, Bluey and Bingo, who are...
Well, actually, I'll pull you up, Josh, because it's not Bluey and Bingo. It's Bandit and Chili, who are the parents.
Okay.
So, which is a bit less predictable, but yeah, really just driving home that point that it's for the parents as well. The team who designed Bluey designed it as co-viewing, they call it, and similar to a Pixar or something like that. Even though it's very kid-friendly, they're hoping that grown-ups will watch it too. And here we are.
I think that point you made about how it's written is so important because it isn't about memorizing letters or numbers or even some kind of high-handed moral lesson. That's what a lot of these shows out there have. The dog gets lost or, something like that. It is this interesting kind of celebration of sort of that parent-child relationship to me. It's also about just the wonder of how kids think, and how they operate. There's just a natural and organic feel to it that is so different than none of the shows you see.
Yeah, definitely. In some episodes, they don't go beyond the front seats of their local takeaway and all the action just happens in that tiny little location. But it's kids having to entertain themselves, it's parents having to deal with kids. It's so much of life just gets captured in those little scenes.
Well, we have mentioned a few of the names of the characters. I know a lot of people might know, for instance, just him as Bluey's dad, or Bluey's mom. But I know throughout this we may be talking about Bandit and Chili, so people should know that. And then, of course, that we have kids and that we'll refer to. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. How old are your kids, Mary?
So mine these days are 5 and 3. But when Bluey first landed and when we started the podcast, we were exactly where you were, Josh. Actually, just about to turn 3 and just 4 months actually. So, yeah, and we were into Bluey from the get-go. But now at 5 and 3, they're nearly the age of Bluey and Bingo, because Bluey and Bingo when the series starts are 6 and 4. So yeah, that's watching my kids grow up through the lens of what Bluey and Bingo are doing, and drawing the comparisons. And sometimes the comparisons aren't that flattering. It's it's been very educational. But what do your kids love about it most, Josh?
I see them repeat the games. We've actually gotten certainly into games like Keepy Uppy with the balloon, which is a typical kids game, but the way it's taken in the show is just so outrageously fun. Magic Xylophone, other things like that. He is just so into it. And I will say, actually, he's about to turn 3, so he's not quite there yet. It's in March, so we have a little ways to go. But they certainly love the bright. I think the younger one, who just turned 1, that she loves the bright colors and the music. The theme comes on and they just want to dance and they get so excited. But there is, just I think stuff they can relate to in it. I think they, see the characters, they see them discovering the wonder of it, the humor of it. The kids' laughs are just like, they're just so natural there. They don't feel acted. And I know that that's one of the interesting things about behind the scenes of this show is that they don't talk about the child actors who they have on the show. If you would want to explain that a little bit. I know that it sounds like they have a mix of both everyday kids and then some who are professional actors.
Yeah, yep, that you've got that exactly right, Josh. Ever since Bluey launched, and you'll see in the credits of every episode, they'll credit Bandit and Chili, and those are both some relatively high-profile people here in Australia. Bandit is actually Dave McCormack, who in his former life was a rock star, well, still is a rock star. He fronts an Australian band called Custard, and Melanie Zanetti is amazing as Chili and has a huge career in the US and all over the world. But the kids, have never been, never been named, and I think that's part of the really kind of family friendly, but also careful and thoughtful approach that the Bluey team have taken as they've built this. What started as a small show and has become a juggernaut. That they didn't want. And they didn't want child star syndrome, perhaps, or they, using very young kids to voice the show, and they didn't want to disrupt their lives. No one outside of Ludo knows who the child actors are, but they've said they're even within the family of the production team at Ludo. So it's all very in-house, and it's a real family affair, the show, because you mentioned the creator, Joe Brum. Even his younger brother, Dan Brum, does all the sound on Bluey and plays Bandit's younger brother, Stripe, which is a really fun role. And I think he's a perennial favorite. And Joe Brum's mum as well, Chris, plays Bluey and Bingo's nana or grandma in the show. So you get that sense watching it of just how important family is to the creators of Bluey, and I think that's what's informed that decision about the kids too.
And I know they don't name the kid actors, but you think perhaps maybe it is one of the Brum's daughters, or that they're involved. You would think. I don't know.
It's I don't know when that will ever be revealed, I guess. But it's interesting to think about.
You mentioned Ludo Studio, and so I want to give people an understanding that this is not the typical Disney Junior show. This was acquired by Disney to show up on Disney Plus, and it is produced in Australia by, as you mentioned, Ludo Studio, which was created by Joe Brum, and this is the first production of that studio, if I'm not mistaken, right? I mean, it's interesting to me how so much of this show, to me, feels a little bit autobiographical regarding Joe and his wife and their family, and I know that. He wouldn't say that. He's like, hey, I'm not the perfect father. I'm not Bandit, because Bandit is this kind of model dad for a lot of dads, he lived in the UK, which if you know the show well enough, that, there's an aspect of the mom and dad characters kind of, it sounds like dating and having a time in England and all this of when they really met. And then, that upon working in animation out in England for a while, moved back to Australia, and that there was an aspect of him, the show and starting the studio was really a big part of that. Is that correct, Mary?
Yeah, look, that's absolutely it. And I think starting the studio, and Joe Brum's studio is called Studio Joho, and then this this idea of his got picked up by the Ludo team, who had already done some child animation things. But yeah, definitely, I think Bluey came into being because he and his wife had their 2 little girls, and they were sort of working, like being inspired by that, but also looking to what to create next. And Bluey came out of that really, I guess, what can be a pretty vulnerable but also inspiring time for a lot of parents, but mainly sleep deprived, possibly.
That's right. Yeah, and certainly these idea of the games being the center of the show, that does come in a lot of ways from his daughters, which is really interesting. He says, I just, you can see him in so many interviews. There was just a very good feature that was published in the Independent that is worth seeking out. But where he says, hey, I was up early with my girls. They were playing these random games, and kids don't even always know how something like a cafe runs. And so they were just inventing kind of their own rules and their own, process of how things flow. And that in itself is just so ridiculous. It's fun. It's you get to see how kids' brains work in a sense, and just sort of that celebration of play, and that there's a lot of even research about play that goes on in this show. Could you comment on that, Mary?
Yeah, look, that's I think you've nailed it there, Josh. That's how Joe Brumm has talked about this show again and again. And then it is also just what so many parents who watch connect to, like you say, the kids. The kids in our house. You go to any park in Australia and you will find kids playing go away, come back on the swings, or setting up a cafe, or doing things that are just there's just enough similarities that you're like, okay, these kids watch Bluey. But the play being so front and center in the Bluey episodes also, I think, is kind of what a lot of what we talk about on Gotta Be Done is what we're seeing our kids pick up and take further as well. And that's kind of the message of so many of the Bluey episodes. The game gets taken further and further as they challenge themselves, or as they overcome adversity or think differently. I think people who are watching Bluey closely enough are seeing that play out as well. And Kate and my co-host, Kate McMahon, and I kind of just sit back and wonder, well, we notice all this now, but would we have noticed it if it wasn't for Bluey and Joe Brumm noticing it in the first place? And don't know the answer, but we're very grateful he did notice in the first place.
That's cool. It's about noticing your kids and having that stronger bond with them. That's beautiful. Well, I do want to ask about a few favorite episodes, and Roger, pull you in as well. Because you're not nearly as versed in this as we are.
I've been watching some episodes the last few weeks, and I've been sort of following sort of Bluey for a while because it's been so popular and stuff. So it's kind of interesting hearing it from a completely different angle, really, from parents and stuff. And it was like you're saying, the difference in sort of how this is just, it's just blown up on Disney Plus. It's been the in the top 10 shows in the US the last 4 weeks. So yeah, literally the episodes and stuff. I just watched the few that Josh recommended to me. But yes, I'd love to hear kind of what ones families and stuff should be looking out for.
Yeah, so I would say that my favorite, a few of them, and I hope that people watch, all of it. It is worth seeing. As a family, this is a groundbreaking show. But I would say Bike from the first season is just a phenomenal show. It's one I always use to introduce Bluey to people, because there's so much going on in that episode, and it's just great to show you the different perspective of how I think that there's some teaching going on. It is very intentionally not a teaching show. But there's some interesting observations that Joe is making through these stories, and his team, of course, that are coming together. I love in the second season, Daddy Drop Off, and A Sleepy Time is the animation in that is just next level. They really stretch themselves of what they were doing animation wise. And also, I know Flat Pack is a big favorite in season 2. Mary, these are all I know, children to you. These episodes so well. You guys review them over a half hour or something to go through the details of them. So what would you say in terms of some of the ones that stand out to you?
I'm so glad you mentioned Bike. Bike was the first episode I ever saw way back at the end of 2018, and that one, it's a very simple playground story of a bunch of kids all just striving to do something they can't quite do yet. But what really makes the episode shine, I think, is two things. One, that Bandit as a parent is barely in this episode. He just kind of sits back, does a bit of you can do it without interfering. And to me and probably all the helicopter parents out there, it was a bit of a steep learning curve to go, oh, that's a way to parent. And actually in the episode, it works out quite well. But the other thing in this episode and in every Bluey episode is the score. So Bluey has a dedicated music composer who is Joff Bush, who's a Brisbane-based composer over here. And this particular episode, Bike, takes Ode to Joy, so Beethoven's seventh, maybe, definitely a number, and starts just with a little, like the sound of a little kid practicing the piano, just a few kind of plinking notes, and builds up into the most amazing, heart-wrenching, and you will cry kind of score. And that for me, just, yeah, I was transported by that episode. I've been hooked on Bluey ever since, but it's also made me, every episode of Gotta Be Done we do, we really deep dive the score. I have no musical knowledge, but my co-host Kate does. And between us, yeah, we work out exactly why a piece of music in that's backing some animated dogs makes us cry probably 7 out of 10 times. And the other episodes that do that, definitely Sleepy Time, definitely Flat Pack, which is an original score. Sleepy Time has the planets as the score, Gustav Holst. But yeah, I'm trying to think of an episode to recommend if you don't want to cry. And I think probably the perfect one to start with is Takeaway from season 1, which is just the story of Bandit going to pick up his Chinese takeaway with the girls and the chaos that ensues. That episode's been compared to an episode of Seinfeld, in that just the level of chaos upon chaos and hilarity upon hilarity that it builds. And yeah, anyone who isn't keen to start with crying when they watch Bluey, I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, the music, there's so much thought and care put into the music. And I think it's one more example of how this is not the typical kind of Disney Plus show in terms of just the detail of it. I know that there are some great Disney Plus things, but I just, in terms of Disney Junior and what goes on in that particular realm, I think there is just so much put into this that is extremely thoughtful. And so many classic pieces, even your kids are just getting familiar sometimes with Mozart and with, a lot of these, Beethoven, etc., these great composers, just through the soundtrack. So that is fascinating in and of itself. Would you draw any parallels, I think, between, even more so between Joe and the, the characters of there? I think about, for instance, the episode Fancy Restaurant, which does get a little bit into their story and autobiographical a bit. Do you think that there are some other little things people might not notice about him? And I know you've now seen, bits of season 3, which the rest of us haven't gotten to yet. And that maybe gets further into, some details about his life and family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I do wonder, and I don't know the answer, if when Joe Brum and the Ludo team set out to create Bluey, they had the parents as much in mind at the start as they do now. But I think, in this digital age when everyone's online, as it became obvious that parents were watching, parents had a lot of questions that weren't about the kids at all and were about, what's Bandit's story? Why is Chili such a good mum? How did they get to this point? Where did they learn to play? And yeah, I think like you say, Fancy Restaurant is a great episode that kind of hints at how hard it is to keep romance alive when you're a parent. It's very safe for work still, but yeah, hilariously, the girls get involved in trying to set Bandit and Chili up on a date in the playroom. And yeah, season 3 brings a lot more of that home as well. We get a flashback episode called Fairy Tale that actually we get to see Bandit as a very colourful 10-year-old and maybe 8-year-old. But anyway, yeah, back in the 80s, and its parents will be in stitches watching that. I think it's a very Australian 80s, but I think there's relatable stuff in there no matter where you were in the 80s, if you can remember it. Yeah, so that kind of thing, I think that so much is packed into those episodes when either it's a flashback or when there's some chat between Bandit and Chili. For instance, there was an episode where some parents were sitting around on a rug as the kids played, and there was just a couple throwaway lines that made it clear they were watching Stranger Things and like debriefing on that. So yeah, there's stuff in there for parents that goes whoosh over the kids' heads, but gives then real parents in the For Real Life playground something to connect over. And that, did you see that on Bluey? And yeah, that I think they're very committed to giving the parents what they want. Which yeah, we couldn't be more happy about. It got to be done because it's what we want to.
And it is a very fun podcast. I do hope people do check it out because it's there. You guys go in depth on a lot of things, and you do. I know that you got to interview, for instance, Geoff Bush, who you just mentioned as well, the music composer, who really gives you some great details of the show. You talk about parenting, and I think there is a lot of debate and discussion around parenting philosophy and ideas that are in this show. Some people, for instance, would see Bandit and Chili as these kind of unattainable parents, that they're able to spend all this time playing with their kids and, just kind of engage in the midst of this pandemic, of course, that we've all been in, that they have this, it seems, endless amount of energy and time, to engage at that level. So I don't think that criticism is necessarily fair. But it is interesting to me. I think there are a few episodes where, as a dad, I feel like, okay, this may be going a bit too far in the level of kind of, I don't know if you want to say disrespect, but just sort of, I mean, at the grocery store, I think, where they're kind of treating him as a child. And, it's one of those things where I did an article that was like, hey, 5 life lessons from Bluey. Here's a couple to ignore, because it was kind of like, there just isn't an understanding of those the differences. Maybe I'm being too uptight about it, but I'm just like, I don't, I do think there's maybe a point when play can go too far. Maybe maybe I'm just being uptight about it, but what would you comment on just all that parenting discussion that's around the show? It is, there's a lot going on there.
Look, it definitely highlights that everyone parents differently. I think kind of Bluey has a very clear jumping off point that's just, if you're going to watch Bluey, you've got to accept as a base that kids are naturally cheeky. And it is the cheekiness of Bluey and Bingo that drives so much of the games. And you're right, in a lot of games, it's actually Bandit and Chili kind of enabling that or even pushing it further, sometimes shepherding it in a different direction. And it's always kind. And there's a great episode called Teasing, which establishes that the whole family do like to tease each other a bit, but they also explores the boundaries of how you can tease without without being upsetting and without being unkind. And I think it's real world to me, Josh, that it's your kids are picking these sort of things up from either the playground or kinder or heaven forbid their own parents. And and I think Bluey's holding up a mirror more than giving kids permission. But that said, there are some very cheeky catchphrases in Bluey, which I've occasionally put my head in my hands and gone, I'm going to be hearing this one for months. And yes, I have been.
I was just going to say, do you think there's some cultural differences, obviously, like with it being an Australian show, with like what maybe like with how Americans are looking at it? Because I know there was reports of certain words like dunny and brekkie and stuff like that being picked up by American kids. Now, as someone that's grown up on like Home and Away and Neighbours, I'm kind of already used to Australian that's kind of been ingrained in me since a kid. But do you think that's had an impact on it?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Roger. I think it's been, in a way, it's almost made people more interested because, for instance, the American families sitting down to watch it, their parents like, well, what does that actually mean? It prompts the Google if it's that strange, and there are some pretty strange concepts. A bin chicken is a recurring theme, which is actually an Australian bird that called an ibis that you find in most cities, just picking scraps out of the bin. So yeah, a lot of American chat about bin chickens in the last couple of years, which has been delightful and kind of disturbing to read.
Yeah, I was going to say,
But
I
yeah,
remember seeing some of them in the park at Sydney for the first time, and literally was just like, I thought I was in a zoo. I was like, I've never seen anything like this. It was just like, what is that thing?
they almost look like miniature dinosaurs, so they are very worth noticing. But yeah, I had, like, off the back of Bluey, I had the experience of a friend had been to a zoo and was showing my little boy the photos of the zoo, and here's the elephants and here's the giraffe, and he just suddenly stops dead in his tracks. He's like, bin chicken, and up there on top of, like, one of the animal shelters, there's a tiny bin chicken in the background, and that's the highlight of all these amazing animals at the zoo, that he's actually gotten to spot a bin chicken. So, yeah, I think the cultural interest is justified because we are a pretty weird mob down here. And yeah, Bluey's pretty proud of that. I think it's never going to shy away from that.
The episode Bin Night it really plays on that a little bit too, because it's, we call it maybe garbage can or garbage bin here, but it's that whole idea of this is just the bin. But that episode it's such a great episode as well. I think that illustrates what they're doing goes beyond the surface, because it's this routine of them putting out the garbage bin, once a week or so, and the recycling as well on the different day of the week. And Bandit is having the conversations with the two girls as they're going out, and then the next morning as the garbage man comes, the mother is on the porch and having the conversations with the kids. And it's this whole advance of a story in that normal routine of family life. And it's just such a brilliant I think plot device to kind of bring you into their world, the kids.
I was just going to say, it kind of sounds, definitely that kind of Seinfeld of a show about nothing kind of thing, of just taking something very basic and just turning it into something. And, that we all do, we all have to do that every week. Go to the bins there.
That's right. Well, Mary, as groundbreaking as the show is, some observers have criticized perhaps a lack of representation, that, you do see this very idealized, you might say, upper middle class lifestyle that they have. And, that there is an aspect of maybe characters with physical disabilities we haven't seen very often, or even, as many single parent families. There's been maybe a few, but how would you respond to, as a big fan of the show, to that sort of criticism that's out there?
That's a good question. I have no background in TV creation or animation or anything like that. And I definitely can sympathize, I guess, with the Ludo team, that it is so much work goes into creating each 7-minute episode to have the plot, to have, the music and the drama and everything that wraps people up in it. I guess, to then work out, well, how do we then tick off a list of all the other things we should be representing? I'm yet to see anyone say, I don't feel I feel like Bluey doesn't represent me, which I think is telling. Like, certainly where we live, my boys go to a daycare that's very multicultural, and every little kid there is proudly wearing their Bluey wear, and that's nothing to do with me. I'm not handing it out, although that's occurred to me before. But no, it's really being very, I think I'm obviously saying this as a white middle class person, but the messages that relate to both how kids play and also the full-onness of parenting, I think, is probably relatable across the board. And yeah, there's, we're only in season 3. There's obviously a lot of room to grow storylines and characters and all those kinds of things. But I think the show has a very good basis to build from. And, in terms of what's already out there in the kids' world as well, at least it's not an unsupervised child running around with 10 dogs and rescuing mares. I feel like it's got a pretty good handle on the real world compared to most.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. Well, you've given a few hints towards season 3. I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. I think my guess, this is just me speculating and seeing some past drops that they've done on Disney Plus, but I think that maybe perhaps by the fall we might see season 3 start to trickle into Disney Plus, worldwide. I know that of the 52 episodes of season 3, that 26, I believe, have aired already in Australia. So, but yeah, I think there are some questions out there that people are interested in from past episodes, and maybe it's probably more parents than kids. But for instance, you had the episode that was Double Babysitter that dealt with an uncle and their normal babysitter who both ended up, coming over to babysit on the same night, and then they kind of strike up a friendship, and their relationship seems to go from there. Those two characters.
Yes.
So. What can we expect to see in season 3? Is there, are there some furthering of those characters?
Well, look, everyone loves romance, so let's start with that up front. So those characters are rad and frisky, and there's the final episode of season 2, I think, was Christmas Swim. Have you had that in the US yet? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that, as you say, that kicks along their relationship a bit. They're on holidays in Bali by the time Christmas Swim appears. But brace your hearts. The first 26 episodes of season 3 don't actually revisit that relationship. But last time we spoke to Joe Brum, he said he was working on a wedding episode and was very keen to explore what a classic Australian wedding might look like, which in my mind, a classic Australian wedding can look like a pretty messy affair. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he means by that. He didn't say whose wedding, but I think everyone's got their fingers crossed. It might be Bluey, might be Rad and Frisky, and maybe Bluey and Bingo might even get like a turnout as the Flower Girls or something.
And I guess other aspects, I know that, maybe we're going to learn some more about Bandit and Chili in terms of what they do. But is it a lot of what we expect and what we love about the show?
Look, if these latest 26 episodes, I think people will enjoy, like, you're going to love them. But I think people will enjoy seeing Bandit and Chili maybe not at their best. Because, as you say, they're held up as these perfect parenting role models. And that's, been true to more or less of an extent. They certainly have their moments of frustration. But yeah, the frustration maybe goes a bit deeper in this season 3. When Gotta Be Done interviewed Melanie Zanetti, who plays Chili, I asked about that and said, is it just getting a bit more stressful in the Healer house? Is it pandemic life? Are they just feeling all the feels a bit more? And Melanie had a good answer that just no, it's just life is hard, and the show is being vulnerable about that. It's actually, Ted Lasso style. It's actually owning the fact that, well, people deal with hard things, and then actually, the episodes never end on a downer. They manage to deal with whatever the challenges are. And to my mind, that's handy equipment to have for parenting in real life as well.
That's tremendous. Well, there have been rumors, of course, of a Bluey feature film over the years that have been circulating. But I know as well that they've done even a stage show out in Australia, and I assume you've seen that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But then maybe the possibility of a larger production that might be coming.
Absolutely. So the stage show is amazing. It got very pandemicified, I guess. There was a lot of toing and froing and waiting and people holding onto their tickets and wondering would they ever see it. But yeah, it's been touring since probably December last year now. Going around pandemic hotspots in Australia. And yeah, it's amazing. It's a collaboration with a theatre company that created these giant puppets. And it's the voices of the original actors, and the puppets are moved on stage by these energetic, hilarious puppeteers. And it really is the most Bluey thing you could ever see. It's beautiful. Bin chickens appear. So does a long dog, which we haven't touched on, but a long dog, for anyone who's been watching Bluey and wants to go back and start again at the start, is a tiny little sausage dog toy that's hidden in every episode. So an Easter egg that you can track down. You have to watch pretty closely to find it in some episodes, but yeah, it'll add layers to your Bluey watching experience. And yeah, the stage show is great. Haven't heard any more on the movie, though, I'm afraid, Josh. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It was probably back in 2019 that first whispers came of it. But then since then, Joe Brum has told us they just decided that the age group that Bluey's targeted at, the 2 to 6 year olds, don't have feature-length movie attention spans, which I feel like coming out of pandemic, they might actually with all that Disney Plus viewing. So perhaps it's time to revisit that. But yeah, nothing firm, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we need to clue him into the results from Paw Patrol, the movie, and the Big Red Dog that my kids loved. You know, they really enjoyed that. So I do hope it sometimes happens. I also know that the format is so unique, and I assume, though, that maybe the stage show proves that a longer form thing can work.
Yeah, well, the stage show is 44 minutes. So, yeah, that was amazing to have that much Bluey happening all at once. But, yeah, watching these giant puppets play Keepy Uppy, or, Who On In as the grannies in their little granny car, yeah, definitely had just a whole is delighting auditoriums all around the country, I can assure you.
Yeah, they've put out Hamilton as a live stage show, and it appeared to do pretty well. I think they should really try to get this filmed.
Yes, okay, that's a good thought.
Yeah, I think that'd be definitely a bit different.
It may not have the same quite level of appeal, all right, but
maybe they could just redo the soundtrack with some hip hop, and then it'll be straight in there.
There you go. Lin-Manuel Miranda, I'm sure he'd be up for it, but well, it's I think this has been really great, Mary, to have this much time with you. Roger, I don't know if you had thoughts on the whole conversation here. And
yeah, because it's kind of it's interesting as well, kind of hearing it from the parents' point of view as well, of how it all works, and kind of the fact that you guys are enjoying it is great, because obviously generally, like with kids shows, they just you get bored of watching the same episode over and over again, and it's it's like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, all these kind of shows just continue to be watched on Disney Plus. And so yeah, it's great hearing adults enjoying it, which I think definitely obviously having an impact on it. But also this kind of whole thing of just being different seems to be the key thing, of it being a little bit different than what we're used to seeing, and that seems to really kind of struck that chord.
Yeah, I think that Australian cultural, really calling that out. I mean, he says we never try to hide the Australianness of the show, and I think that really comes through the language, the little eccentricities, and cultural things that are there. They really do draw you in. There was a little hints in the Independent article, Mary, that perhaps Joe says he's a little bit bored, or he wants to move on past the show, that he wants to do adult animation. I thought that was an interesting kind of thing from the creator of the show. For instance, if you look at like SpongeBob SquarePants and where that went in animation, I think the first 4 seasons were run by the creator, and then past that point, the creator moved on to other things, and it honestly, it did lose something of its center, I feel like, after that point. And he came back, I think, a little bit, and then you saw some of the same humor. But what would you say about when you hear Joe say, well, I'm maybe wanting to do a more Simpson style type show, and I hope that he gets to have the full creative freedom to do what he wants to do, because he's brilliant, and I want to hear more stories from him at any level. But I do think Bluey fans would think, oh, is this gonna leave us out to dry a little bit?
I think I'm tearing up just thinking about it. But look, it's a really good question. There hasn't been other writers on Bluey so far. Maybe like 2 or 3 episodes have had another writer come in with Joe. So I think it's something that he definitely, feels like he's writing every episode. It's a huge job to do, and I think he said publicly before, if he and the Ludo team weren't having fun anymore, Bluey wouldn't exist. Like it's a passion project, but that passion needs to be there. I think he made the point in the article that the part of the frustration or the appeal of doing adult stuff again is that doing kid stuff is so policed. And even from Bluey season 1 to Bluey season 2, there were subtle changes that we noticed on the podcast. For instance, that in season 1, the girls had a certain type of seatbelt that only went, from one shoulder down to the hip. And in Australia, actually, you're meant to have like a full harness until you're over 6, which is, so the girls weren't in the right seatbelts. And this was clearly pointed out, and they had to amend that and get the girls being safe for, this 7-minute kids show. So those expectations and what people notice, and won't someone think of the children, obviously looms very large when you're creating kids content. This might be interesting to Disney Plus fans that before Bluey, Joe's Studio Joho did a bit of content for College Humor over in the US, including a couple animated shorts that went quite viral. One of them was called Tinderella, which you might have seen, and it was the Cinderella story, but the princess, swiping left and right, and her attempts at romance in the crowded bar to find her prince, very funny and worth looking up. It's still on YouTube. And the other one that did hugely well was the alternate ending of, do you know Pixar's The Paper Man, where the guy's making paper planes? And that alternate ending turns the paper into a third character with dubious intentions. So there's like, obviously children's content can be played very well for adult audiences, and you can't get away with as much in the kids' world. So appropriately, I guess. But look, I don't know the answer to what will happen to Bluey if Joe walks away. But I really hope it keeps going, because it could go forever. I want my children's children to be watching new episodes of Bluey.
Because that was a kind of a question of like, do you think it in some ways like a generation of like the next batch of kids might be into something else, and therefore, and I mean from the creator's point of view, you might be getting that thing of like, just doing the same thing over and over and just running out of ideas. But I did wonder like whether or not, like, because you see it like with so many different shows, like the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, the Roadster Races, kind of in some ways the next generation of kids want something fresh for them.
Yeah, I would say perhaps so. I just knowing kids entertainment pretty well. I don't know. I think one thing about Bluey is that the seasons are 52 episodes, and that is a rarity in this space, I think, to have that many. And of course, it's 1 per week is the intention, but I think for them to get an order like that keeps them busy, for a full year and a half plus. I think getting it done in terms of the scripting, in terms of that whole process of production that they do, which is largely obviously done in Australia. So I could, I could see them moving on. Maybe who knows if it'll go 5, 6 plus seasons. I hope that it goes as long as they feel it's right. I do think that you have the issue of sometimes shows being sustained past the point when they're great, and so I do think that there's an aspect of quality and excellence to the brand, and we're all familiar, for instance, with the Disney directed to video sequels. I mean, they did like Bambi 2 and stuff like that. And some of these that just didn't have any business being made, but it was all for the quick buck. And so I have appreciated that there's been even though Bluey is a global phenomenon, that it's right now, I think they said at the toy license, show that it's saying this could be the number one, kind of toy license worldwide. So it's not like this isn't being exploited. And by the way, people might assume that Bluey's going to show up in the Disney parks. This is not a Disney-owned character, so they should know that this is a little bit different. I don't think they have that license figured out yet, for the theme parks. And regardless, it's not a Disney-owned character, so this is something they've brought in. And I don't even know how long, frankly, the license with BBC is, for the show. If ever this show left Disney Plus, I mean, the weeping and gnashing of teeth, that would be out there would be quite significant. So I hope that Disney does lock this up for, many, many, many years to come in terms of it being on their service. But I don't know. Any thoughts on all that, Mary?
Where to start? Look, yeah, so we're in season 3, as we've talked about in Australia. Season 4 hasn't been commissioned. And I think it's usually one season ends before the next one gets. Actually, no, I think previously, the next one's been commissioned before the previous season ends. So they've still got, probably at least 6 months before that, before the second half of that season is out. And we're at, well, will they or won't they kind of time. Probably another question of will they or won't they, and how, and the logistics of making it work. Also, Josh, I don't know if you've read about this, but because the girls' voices are so distinctive and they're obviously young kids, how to manage seasons and seasons as their voices get older, whether like a Peppa Pig, you can switch in another voice actor and hope no one makes too much of a fuss, or you just get the kids to act down, which I guess you can't do forever. But yeah, that's I heard Joe Brum interviewed on that, and he didn't really have the answer. Like, it's something that's still very front of mind as well. We need to work this out, and yeah, it's just one of life's challenges, I guess, that kids grow up. Definitely a theme that fits Bluey.
Well, I also kind of fits a lot in with like the Disney Channel shows, because there's so many of them. Obviously, they start out younger and they've only really got like a couple of years really to film them. And so I know like when they get cancelled, a load of people will be like, "Why have they cancelled it? I love it." It's like, well, they're 18, 19.
Yeah.
They're not kids anymore.
Yeah, they're
and
at the pub.
So it's that kind of thing. Like, obviously they did do it with Peppa Pig, where they kind of changed the voice, but will it be the same?
Here in the States, there's a radio drama that it's rare to have a radio drama still going, but there's one called Adventures in Odyssey that's been going since 1987. And they've cycled through kid characters about once every 5 years or so for that reason, because the kid grows up. But then they've had older characters that are a central character of the show, Mr. Whitaker, who's kind of that grandfatherly figure. And they've had 3 different actors play him because they've had people pass away who were, the original voices of the actor. And so it's really, it's yeah. I mean, it's interesting because in 87 and in the 88, 89, when they first introduced the character, he was a World War II veteran. And now the character is still going, and you're like, how old is he?
Wow.
So it's interesting. There are ways to get around it when you recast, but then like the logic of your show starts to fall apart a little bit in terms of some details of it. So
that's why Doctor Who works so great. They just get again.
That's right.
Well, there's ongoing conversation about the house that the healers live in, and the fact that the layout seems to change occasionally to fit whatever antics are going on in the episode. And there's a big Doctor Who parallel there, that it's bigger on the inside. So yeah, perhaps time traveling in the healer's world is the next step.
Well, it's interesting because my wife and I, we were out this weekend and we talked to somebody in their 20s, and she mentioned Bluey, and I think it was about, I guess she was getting her phone upgraded actually. And she had all these episodes, of course, downloaded on her phone, and she had to clear them out to get the replacement made. And so the lady at the Apple store said, "Oh yeah, I love Bluey, and I don't have kids. No, I just watch it." And so that was rather surprising. But what would you say to folks maybe who haven't given this a try, who may have kids, who may not have kids? Why should they consider giving Bluey a chance?
Look, I think a couple reasons. One is it is the perfect length of time. 7 minutes is just, it can be the pep you need in the morning to get out the door. It can be the 7 minutes you just need your kids to sit still so you can, get a shower. It can be anything that is just enough without taking over your day, unless you really settle in to watch all 100 of episodes now. But also, it's just so much heart that comes from just a thoughtful, beautiful, caring place, and that comes through in the show. And it's a positive place as well. I think, especially for anyone kind of trudging through the pandemic, if you want to be reminded of, well, life is beautiful, kids are beautiful, and the innocence and the imagination that's there, tapping into that, you can't go wrong.
So well done. Yeah, I think the wonder of it, and like you say, the imagination, it's just it really just helps you celebrate kids and life, and the family parenting, the struggles of parenting, and realize that there are people who relate to what you're going through. So it's a wonderful thing. So, well, it's been an interesting one. We got to do this live from the Eastern US, from England, from Australia. This was really something. So glad we can all coordinate our schedules.
The United Nations going on here.
That's right. Roger, I know you've got the business to give us all at the end, but thank you. Thanks so much, Mary, for coming on and doing this. And hopefully we'll do it again when season 3 drops.
Oh, pleasure chatting, Josh and Roger. Thanks for having me.
Thank you much. And yeah, Mary, do you want to just do another quick plug for the podcast? Everyone knows where they can find you guys.
I would love to. Look, we've talked for a long time about Bluey. Believe it or not, our Gotta Be Done, the Bluey podcast, talks even longer, about a 7-minute episode every time we're recapping. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Gotta Be Done. We're on all the socials. You can find us at Bluey Podcast on Twitter or at Bluey Pod on Insta. Our website is just www.blueypod.com. That was
a definite flashback to my backpacking around Australia. So you can get us at www.whatsondisneyplus.com. I just remember it's like that just took me back there. Yeah, but yeah. So as per usual,
good on you, mate.
Good on you. Yeah, we can obviously check us out over at www.whatsondisneyplus.com, and you can find us on all the socials. And on that note, guys, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you guys soon. Later.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
I'd like to thank all of our Patreon and YouTube channel members for their support. You can become a member from as little as $2 a month, and you get access to our weekly Q&A and much more.